Art is subjective, and it depends on who you are as to whether or not you like something. Some people even argue over what is art.
What is art?
But I can tell you, this is art. And it's good art too. I don't even wear glasses. Whose are these? Shh. Let's finally get into making the Porsche 959, the process of building it, and especially the body itself. Now, the beginning of it is mostly a run-of-the-mill MF01X chassis build. However, obviously the big thing about this is the body, the detail kit that's included by Rob Mitchell at NeedABiggerShed. As I go along here, I'm sure I'll just say Rob, but I'm not actually referring to myself in the third person. Try not to get too confused. I will also put a timestamp down below as to when the actual body part of the video starts, but there is some bespoke parts that are made for the chassis itself that are included in the actual build. But let's get onto that right now. And there will of course be glamour shots of the actual car itself towards the end of the video. As usual, we're gonna start by laying out a lot of the parts here. Again, it's a typical Tamiya kit. There's the ABCD bags, there's all of the parts trees, and for this kit, it is regular Phillips head JIS screws. Now, I decided I was going to use my power screwdriver to put it together. It's a pretty reliable power screwdriver, the Ryobi one, and it doesn't go too fast. You don't have to really worry about heating up the plastic. However, once I started, I just said, you know what? I'm gonna go with Hex hardware. I have some bulk stainless steel button heads that I purchased off of Amazon a long time ago, and I just keep them around. And actually, if you just get the M3 10mm button head, stainless steel screws, you're gonna probably take care of about 95%. And I mean specifically the 10mm ones. It uses 10mm screws basically throughout the whole kit. So I would recommend doing that because it's gonna save your wrist quite a bit. Included in the Rob Mitchell version of this kit is our Yeah Racing dampers instead of just the stock friction ones that are included with the MF01X chassis. You also get full ball bearings. You also get a branded silver can, so it's not just, it is just a regular silver can. I think it's torque tuned. Somewhere in there, I could see it. Yeah, torque tuned. However, he did laser etch the RMR Rob Mitchell Racing logo on the motor, which is a really cool touch. And I think that's gonna be a common theme that you're gonna see throughout the whole build, that there are a lot of these nice little customizations, these little touches that really kind of bring the kit into something really special to not only have, but to build. And once it's built, it's obviously an incredible piece of work. The other thing about this MF01X chassis is that a lot of the ones from Tamiya are either in the medium or long version. I believe when I got my Escort kit, it was the long version. I went out and found a medium length drive shaft, and that was a little tough. And then at some point I was just curious and I wanted to see if I could get a short drive shaft, and it was almost unfindable. However, Rob Mitchell does make his own. He's been making his own for a while that you could just purchase, and he included those in the kit. Now, when I ordered it, I have another MF01X chassis that I've had for a little while, and I wanted to go ahead and make a second car into the shorter wheelbase, and I'll get to showing that car in a little bit. I asked him if he could include an extra short shaft, and he did for me, which was really nice. As I mentioned, there's a bunch of kind of like bespoke parts, even for the actual chassis build itself. One of those is the front body mounts. The front body mounts are actually incorporated, the ones that are included with the 959 kit actually incorporate the mud flaps. So it's kind of one piece that kind of wraps around the hole where the wheel well is to give you the mud flaps underneath, and it includes the right size body mounts. On the back, it's just the standard body mounts that you cut down when you're all done with building the kit. There's also a skid plate front and rear. The rear one also incorporates the rear exhaust, and the front one, the way it kind of goes around all of the suspension components is really great attention to detail, great engineering. I know that Rob is a photographer, I believe, by profession, but he has to have some sort of extensive engineering training in his background because the work he's done is so precise. As you're building it up, you start with the rear gear case, the rear motor mount. All of that is standard. You're just going to go through all of that. And as you build up the rear, you're also going to do the turnbuckles for the upper mounts. I've featured this in a lot of my videos. My little way to do this is to put it in the chuck of the drill and slowly kind of spin it on there. Again, you have to watch your speed because you don't want to heat it up and melt the plastic. As you're building the diff, I found it to be very helpful to get one of, let's see, where is it here? I know I've got one sitting around. Yeah, right. These little grabber things, I picked up a pack of maybe 4 of them on Amazon. And a couple are in my pit box, a couple are here in the workshop. It's great for getting stuff out of the bottom of, any type of container, a bag, or just holding stuff in place. So grab one of those. Christmas is coming up. Get yourself one. At this point, the instructions, it will actually split and it will tell you how to construct the short, the medium, and the long version. The way that's achieved is by putting together sections of that kind of center chassis in different configurations. Rob even includes a little piece of sandpaper to file down just a little bit of if there's any burrs on the short shaft that he includes. This was one place that I was actually had a little bit of trouble because I was trying to figure out exactly where the bearings went for the drive shaft as they actually seat into the front and rear gear assemblies. I mentioned that I have another MF-01X that I've put ball bearings into. I went and looked at that and I looked at it and I was like, well, actually I've even done this one wrong. So I had to redo that. Finally got the bearings all set up in the right configuration. You'll see a close-up of it here. So let me go ahead and I can read the order from inside out. So it goes flange bearing, flange facing outward. The spacer, the B2, the step down goes towards the outside of the shaft. Then you have the bevel gear, and then the spacer, again, the B2 spacer, the step down now facing out. The non-flange bearing is on the outside. And then you just go the opposite for the other. So you can see visually it's probably better than me actually explaining it. You're going to break into the Yeah Racing aluminum oil-filled dampers that are included with this 959 kit. The way they're packaged, they're kind of semi-assembled, but you have to break them down completely in order to build them back up. There are kind of instructions that are included with the Yeah Racing kit, and it just basically shows you the order of all the pieces that go together. If you're building this kit, you've probably built a few kits before, you should kind of have a good idea of how shocks go together. Shouldn't be too much of a problem. Now, I always put just a tiny bit of Loctite on the bottom cap. I've had that come unscrewed before on me. Sometimes I've even done it on the top cap. I don't know how effective it is because once you start bleeding it and everything like that, you're getting oil everywhere. So it may not actually hold on the top cap with Loctite, but the bottom cap, I do put a little dab of Loctite in there to hold that in place. Now, maybe it's a little silly that I'm actually building these out because I'm not going to run this, but there's always something in me that feels like I have to just kind of do it as you're supposed to do it. The shock collars get a little frustrating after a while because you have to thread them all the way up. Obviously, it's a better way to have a car in the end, but when you're building them, it's a little frustrating. So onto the drill, they went as well, and I just did them that way. At this point, dampers are done. You're going to be slapping them on the car. The Yeah Racing kit includes both ball ends and screws and inserts and things like that. And I believe for the rear, you're going to actually just use the kit supplied step screws on the top, I should say. On the bottom, again, kit supplied step screws, there's a spacer. And then for the front, you can actually use the ball ends that are included with the Yeah Racing kit, both at the top of the shock and on the arms at the bottom of the shock. The rear hub carriers are both labeled very well as to left and right. You're going to do the high setting for this setup and for really any kind of rally car that's coming on the MF-01X chassis. I used some Tamiya anti-wear grease that I had laying around for no other reason, just to know that I've completed the car as if it was going to run. But again, I'm probably not going to run this anytime soon. It is at step 32 that you'll be switching out the kit supplied body mounts for the ones that are provided by Rob in this kit. And again, they include the whole mud flap assembly. So it is kind of part of the finishing kit. In the box that actually is acting as the car stand, and you see they actually do this kind of beveled kind of ribs here because it's upside down. If you flip it over, that's how you close it. They're screwed shut, but there's also a screw kit in here. I almost missed the screw kit because it seats so well in this box that he provides, and the tolerance is so tight that I didn't even notice it was in there. Even though I'd done an unboxing before, I forgot that it was in there. And that's another theme of this, is how well the 3D parts actually fit together. I don't have a ton of experience with 3D printed parts, so I'm not familiar with how tight the tolerances can be. And I can tell you that the tolerances that are executed in this kit are extremely tight and extremely well done. You're mounting the motor at this point, and oftentimes in a lot of these Tamiya kits, they have set mounting holes for set pinion tooth size selection. However, here you do have a kind of free hole that you can kind of move it around in, and there's like a little peephole to be able to see in and set the gear mesh, and then you ultimately cover that back up, which is kind of a cool little touch. You can see here that the motor has this laser etched logo for Rob Mitchell Racing, which again is a very cool touch. I have it pointed up. When it's in the car, you really can't see underneath the motor at all, so that's why I chose to kind of have it pointing that way, because then you can at least see it when the body is off. And I like to keep the interior nice and tidy by twisting the wire around a like screwdriver shank, and that keeps everything in place, especially if you're going to be using the inside driver figure, kind of the rally driver figure. You do want to keep that stuff nice and clean and below that kind of line where that interior body part is going to sit. At this point, all the electrics are installed. We give it a test, everything works, so that's great. The wheels and tires are bespoke to this. The standard mini rally block tires and mini rally wheels are actually quite a bit smaller than these. So these fill up the wheel wells really nicely. And it comes as a 3-piece. So what you have is you have the front, you have this rim, and then you have this back plate that goes in there. Now that back plate ultimately looks like a disc brake, but if you look at it really closely, it's just because it's fitting into the spokes. And what's especially nice about this, again, the attention to detail, is there's only one way to set these in to get the correct offset. That's how he's designed these, so you can't really mess it up. And then once you screw all these in, again, I used a power driver because that's just a lot of screws to put in for each wheel. And at this point, we're assembling the mud flaps, just a little bit of CA. It slides in there. It's kind of a neoprene, material here to kind of complete that look. And what's interesting is I have a 959 body that I got from Team Blue Groove. Notoriously, the original 959 car, the body for it is extremely brittle underneath this front lip here. Now the reason for that is when they do these molds, they get up in there and then they kind of have to peel it off the mold. And if you go too far underneath, you can't get the Lexan in there and you can't get it off the mold. I believe it was maybe L&L that did these bodies, not Team Blue Groove, for this particular project. And what they did is actually tilted the whole body at an angle, so the angle of getting that mold out was a little less severe, and also the ability to get more of that Lexan underneath here. So this part right here underneath is a lot more robust than the Team Blue Groove version that I have. Now, the Team Blue Groove version is great too, don't get me wrong. I know sometimes here in the US, it's a little more difficult and certainly more expensive to get those L&L ones here. So you're gonna have no problem with the Team Blue Groove one, just to be clear about that. The rear skid plate here is actually several pieces that kind of clamp together around the back. So you actually put some flathead screws kind of facing outward, and you have no way of getting to those to hold them. But once you actually put it all together, put it onto the actual chassis, that friction holds it tight enough for you to be able to tighten the nut on to hold the flaps and the whole assembly together on that back end. Now, what I should have done at this point is actually paint the inside of the exhaust tips. Rob actually includes a little decal to go in there, but I just have some semi-gloss black, so I was just able to paint in there. But what I ended up doing, because I already installed it at this point, didn't want to take it apart, I just put the whole thing up and down in my vise and just got in there a little bit. So if you're doing it, maybe do that ahead of time. Now, I actually put the mounting holes just in the wrong position, maybe off by about 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters maybe. I put it so the whole body sits a little bit too far back, so the holes themselves are a little bit too far forward. If you look really closely at the photos of the top of the car on the box, you can see a little bit better where they go. There's a little hump in the back window at the top corners, and if you put it just right behind that little hump, that's where it's going to be perfect for it. So I would do that. I would put those holes in, put the body on there when it's still unpainted, and then you can drop the whole thing on. The front is as provided. These posts as provided are low enough where you can just put it on there and then mark relatively accurately where those holes are going to be. I did it this way because I had already painted a 959 body, again from Team Blue Group, but because they're creating their own molds off of the original 959 body, they're virtually the same. And I just marked it using that. But the more I look at my other 959, I realize like, oh, actually this is also a little bit too far back. When you're doing it, pay attention, go a little bit, more forward so the holes are a little bit further back. Again, just below that hump on the back, and you can go off of that. So I ended up having to do just a little bit of trimming just around here. Everything works just fine, doesn't catch or anything like that. So ultimately it looks fine, but that's where you need to do it. With the wheels, I decided I just didn't want them regular white. I wanted to do something just a little bit different. Now, the 3D printing does tend to leave a little bit of grooves. You'll see that I do quite a bit of sanding. I use quite a bit of Tamiya putty.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, not a lot, but I'm just saying I used it on most of the pieces. However, with the wheels, it was just gonna be too hard to sand and use putty and stuff like that. So I just kind of laid on real thick with the primer. I laid on real thick with the Tamiya PS1 white. And then over that with the what is gold, 13? Let's see. Yeah, PS13 gold. And ultimately that made the gold a little bit too light to be backed with white. And you'll see I actually did something a little different with the rest of the gold on the body, and I'll get to that in a moment. So I just laid it on really thick, and it made it kind of smooth it out with just the paint. And then over that, I did semi-gloss clear coat over it to protect it. I don't know where the actual tires are from. Obviously, he created the wheels. I don't think he manufactured the actual tires themselves, so I don't know where those are from. Probably some aftermarket company, but it doesn't say. They come in their own packaging from Rob Mitchell, from RMR, NeedABiggerShed, whatever you want to call it. Specifically, now we'll get into the body painting. And at this point, I started to look at the decals, and I realized that really all your painting is blue and white, okay? And you have to kind of land that transition, that line between the blue and white, pretty precisely to be able to then use the decals. I actually messaged Rob. I said, hey, do you have any kind of like template that you're working on? Maybe you could shoot over to me so I could figure out exactly where to line this up. And he said, I actually painted the stripes on the body and didn't use decals. And I felt at that point the gauntlet was thrown. I should go ahead and try and paint it.
Challenge accepted.
So what I did is, with the film still on it, still the protective film, I took the decals that were included in the kit and just laid them over to use them as a template. I will say they fit perfectly. I did my whole usual routine as if I was putting it straight on the body for a finished look to get everything lined up correct. Use the wet method, use the hair dryer, and really got it on there perfectly. And then use that as my guide. I used a strip of the Tamiya like white flexible masking tape to get a perfect and uniform line in between the gold and the red, and then the rest of it was done with the Tamiya masking tape as well to make sure that my lines were nice and straight. I'm not talented enough to actually cut really precise, nice, kind of clean lines, so I find that using that Tamiya masking tape really helps me with that. He also includes a lot of masking parts. So mask around not only to mask off the lights, but also there was one to go around the light that allowed me to get a nice, clean, uniform trim around that light. At this point, I think I should mention that the decals were done by MCI. However, these are special to this specific kit, not just to 959. You can get a 959 decal sheet, which is what I've done before. The original ones that are posted are actually, I believe, 10 scale, and I ordered some and had them brought down to 12 scale, and they worked on the Team Blue Group body that I got. These are also pre-cut for you. Mixed feelings on that. Obviously, it saves time and maybe your hand a little bit, but it's simply, You can get more precise doing it yourself. You can get closer, but if they're already die cut, I'm telling you, man, I'm not gonna go in and cut them all again. And they're pretty good. There were maybe 1 or 2 spots where I trimmed it just a little bit to make it fit a little bit nicer. I did a test spray of the gold. Again, I didn't really like how yellow the wheels turned out, so that would just be gold backed with white. So I did gold backed with silver. I did gold backed with gunmetal. I did several different trying different number of coats of gold. And I believe where I ended up was 2 coats of gold backed by gunmetal. And I think I probably could have gone 3 coats of gold backed by gunmetal just to lighten it up just a little bit. I think it's just a hair too dark from what I wanted it to be. I also decided that I didn't want to do just regular blue and regular red. I went metallic red and metallic blue just to kind of make it pop a little bit more. So that's also backed with the gunmetal to kind of really give it a little more rich color. Looking at the box, there's actually some angles that are missing to help you kind of determine where not only decals go, but what some of the color and where they land, how they land on the car. A lot of the research that I did looking for images of the real 959 had various different configurations of the livery. One of those differences was the back window here. The back window would be clear on some, would be blacked out on others. Now, for this one, I decided to go ahead and do it all black. There's nothing really to see through here if you leave it clear. You can't see the laser etching of the RMR logo, so there's really no good reason to leave it clear. So I painted it black. When I painted the body, I had a specific order that I wanted to remove the mask and do the colors, and I kind of messed up that order. I removed the portion that I wanted to be painted blue too early, first, whatever, and had to go back and remask it. Now, I didn't want to do the whole liquid mask thing again, so I used masking tape, which is always a little bit of a risk because you could get some of the paint bleed coming through. While I was working on that, I started to prep and prime and sand and get all the little body piece accessories.
You got a lot of cranium accessories.
All squared away. The way that I did the body accessories was, and especially the wing here, is I would kind of use the Tamiya putty.
Yeah, that's right.
To cover it because the 3D printing leaves just kind of some fine ridges and I wanted it nice and smooth. So you kind of use it almost like Bondo over these pieces here, nice and thin. And then once it's dry, you actually work through the sandpaper grit. So I think I started at 150, then 220 regular sandpaper, and then I have some of the Tamiya foam sandpaper blocks at 300 and 600. I think I just went to 300 for the first go around. Then I would prime them, so primed both all of the parts here, and then started to paint them. Now you'll see in this little clip here, the one on the left is post sanding and the one on the right is just the putty. Next up was doing the red stripe.
Red stripe.
And similarly, this is red backed by silver, backed by ultimately gunmetal. And I'll get into the actual paint colors and backings that I did. I did ultimately end up with just a small bit of the red bleeding underneath the masking tape. I was able to use some Tamiya polycarbonate cleaner to clean that right up, and it cleaned up perfectly. However, when I went to paint the metallic blue, I noticed that there was possibly some part that I missed that had been oversprayed from the red, and I looked at it and it was under the front lip here. I actually had to set down the body and walk away because I thought I had missed that when I was kind of cleaning the areas where I maybe had gotten some bleed through on the red, and I thought that I had missed it and it got red and now was back to the paint and there was nothing I could do. However, I came back to it later, decided to take a little bit of that polycarbonate cleaner, try and scrub it on the outside of the body, and sure enough the paint came off. It was just overspray had come around on the outside, thankfully. So I will really quickly cover the actual colors that I used here. You may be looking at this, it's not actually just white, it's actually pearl white backed by white. So it has just a little bit of extra kind of flake in it or a little sparkle to it. And I will go through the orders and the colors that I actually use. So specifically, pearl white, PS57, backed in PS1 white. Then I did for the blue, you have the metallic blue, which is PS16, and that is backed in PS silver, and then ultimately backed in the gunmetal PS23. The silver is PS12. Metallic red, PS15, again, backed with the PS12 silver, backed with PS23 gunmetal. And lastly, the gold is PS13, backed in just the PS23 gunmetal. On the outside, before you peel everything off, I went and cut around where I wanted these vents on the side and this kind of radiator area back here on the engine cover to be a matte black. So cut around the actual protective film that's on the body, spray painted that black, and then it wasn't quite dull enough, so I went over it with the PS55 from Tamiya, that is the flat clear, to make it just a little bit more flat, so it's very distinct from the rest of the car. And now we have the moment of truth where we peel off all of the protective film and see how we actually did. The kit also comes with light buckets, both front and rear. The rear ones, I should have also painted the outside of those black because you do get some of that light leaking through. And when the lights are on, you can kind of see that light leaking through on the inside of the body from those light buckets in the rear. Rob Mitchell, while the kit is provided with decals from MCI Racing that are pre-cut, he also actually includes laser cut vinyl for things like the body panel lines, the window surrounds, and the great thing is that the window surrounds are both offered in one solid piece and also in smaller parts, so you can kind of, piece it together if you want or need to go back and add some detail. What I did is I ended up having to kind of use the whole pieces, but ended up cutting them just a little bit to fit just right. I do want to touch on the body panel lining that he provides. It's probably the best body panel lining that I've ever used. Now, I've never used the Kyosho micron tape, I think it's called, which is often recommended on a few different forums that I'm on. But this was great. It was very thin, very workable. I used just a little bit of heat from a hairdryer to get it nice and smooth around the corners. I did this several weeks ago, the body panel lines, and they haven't lifted at all or moved or shifted. I will mention I did body panel lining before the decals. I should have done it afterwards. If you were to see something in real life, those decals would kind of be across the whole body, and where you had body panels, they would look like it was a void, and that's how it should look on here. So I kind of had to go back and do it a little bit and ended up with having just enough of that body panel lining provided by Rob for this kit. The front light buckets are comprised of, I want to say, 4 parts. You have the one structure that goes across the whole front. Now, the way it's designed is it's designed to be held on by screws. I didn't want that, so I actually shoe glued that in, obviously after I painted it and everything like that. So let me go through the rest of the 4 parts. So you have the main structure, you have a little insert that goes in there, and then you have the kind of clear lens, and then on the back of it, there's a adapter for 5mm LED lights, which is what I used because I used the racing light kit that I've used on a bunch of different models. It comes with 4 white lights and 2 red lights. I cut off 2 of the white lights because I'm just doing the 2 headlights and the 2 taillights, and that's it. I'm not going to get any more beyond that. For the light bucket assembly, I painted it all the semi-gloss, the XF11 Tamiya black. And then for the inserts, I just kind of painted the inside with a chrome pen that I have, and I'll get a little shot of that and put that up here as well. Then I glue that in using a little bit of Shoe Glue 2. Now Shoe Glue 2 is a little bit more viscous, a little bit thinner, so it allows you to work it a little bit more into some tighter spots. Once I got that in there, you can CA a little bit, just a tiny bit of CA, and put those lenses on there. And then on the back, you can just do a little dab of CA to put the 5mm adapter insert, and then you can press those 5mm LED lights in. Don't really need to glue them in. Also included on that vinyl cutout sheet is a Project 959 logo, and I decided to take that and put it onto the bottom of the car for no real reason. Just thought it'd be a nice thing to put on there, and why let it go to waste just having it sit on that vinyl cutout sheet. For the top roof lights, again, a lot of discrepancy between a lot of reference photos that I was looking for. However, in the kit, he does include these kind of 2 light per bucket, and then another bucket with 1 light. So I decided to go with the 2, just thought it was kind of neater looking. I did see a photo of that, the 185 car with those on there, so that's what I went with. The hole that you punch through the top of the body there's a little dimple there, so you don't have to guess where it goes. And I think I ended up doing a 4mm hole, but what's cool is the actual post that comes off of these buckets is squared off on one side. It's rounded and then squared off. So I went in and just kind of squared off that hole a little bit, pressure fitted it right on there. Probably didn't even need to glue it, but I did. But it lines it up perfectly so you don't have to worry about them twisting or anything like that. For the color of the lights, so you have these red rear lights, and then these are actually supposed to be beacon lights on top here. I really wanted to find like a candy color so I could replicate some sort of, lens type looking light, because these are just molded in white. Couldn't really find the candy color, so I ended up getting transparent red and transparent blue, Tamiya colors. I just was gonna layer up a bunch of coats. So here I have what is one coat of the transparent blue and red, and then ultimately what I ended up with, I think I did about like a dozen coats of the color to get that color that I wanted, to make it look like it was an actual lens. Also ended up doing a couple coats of lacquer thinner over that. For the door handles, fairly straightforward. They have 2 posts coming off of them, so I just measured that with some calipers, locked my calipers in place, and then kind of etched a little mark on the bumps that are on the doors of the car, so I had the perfect positioning for them, and just poked little holes with some body reamers, put it through there, little dab of glue, done. On the roof lights, I used silver paint. I think it was like Arctic silver or something like that. Didn't want it like a really kind of metal flaky looking one, because I think on the real car it's probably like stainless steel or aluminum that's bent into shape, and then it has holes cut in it. I used some Tamiya body panel, some black body panel paint to get into those little holes there to make it look like they were, cut out holes. To get to the wing part, it's actually a lot more involved than it looks. You think it's just a gold wing, but really what it is, it has 3 different colors on it. You have the gold on top, there's a blue line on the bottom, and it's actually white of the body underneath. Kind of had to do the reverse of what I'm used to doing painting wise. Primed the whole thing, ultimately ended up sanding it down in between priming coats and the finished priming coat with, I believe, 600 and 1,000 grit of that foam sandpaper from Tamiya. Then I laid down a white coat, the PS1, and then the PS57 pearl white to match the actual body itself. At that point, I masked off what I wanted to stay white, and then spray painted the gunmetal and then the metallic blue. Then had to mask off what I wanted to keep blue, so it's just that little line in back. Then did the gunmetal and the gold. And then I think I did about 6 or 7 coats of lacquer thinner. With the lacquer PS paints, you don't have to worry about this so much. You can just go over with lacquer thinner, but still I wanted to do a bunch of light coats. And before I actually did the light coats, I hit it with just, I think I have like 2,000 grit sandpaper. You don't want to do too much, obviously you'll go through the paint you just put on there. The panel clips that exist on the real car, I found pictures with both of them mounted kind of horizontally and vertically. On the box, it looks like they're mounted vertically on these panels. You get 6 of them, and the detail, again, another thing that's incredible. And on the box, yes, they're mounted vertically. However, because as I mentioned, I didn't quite put the body posts in the correct location, so I was kind of out of real estate on the top of that black panel in back. So I had seen pictures, again, with them mounted horizontally, so I just did it that way. Worked out pretty well. They are also just held with a little bit of shoe glue in place, and they look great. I think they look spectacular. I did a little final gluing of the light buckets, both front and rear. What's nice about the shoe glue is it kind of levels itself out. So even if you put it in there not particularly perfectly, it'll kind of level itself out. I did put just a little dab of CA glue on the lights, both front and rear, just to hold them in place, but honestly they fit tight enough. I don't think you really need to put the CA glue on there, but couldn't hurt. Then I tidied up all of the wires underneath using some of the flexible aluminum tape that I think even Tamiya kits will sometimes provide when they have something like this. As far as the interior cockpit, I'm not a huge fan of putting these kind of interior cockpits on the cars that I've done. Very few of them have them that I have. But when I opened up the package and I saw the detail on the driver faces and helmets, I felt like I needed to do something with it. Maybe eventually I'll get around to painting it, but right now it's just unpainted, it's in there. I actually think it looks pretty cool unpainted because you can just kind of see a lot of the detail in the print. Again, these are designed to be held in with screws, but I just used some Velcro that sticks on both sides. So that's what I'm using. And the light buckets kind of poke through and just miss it, but it helps it line it up perfectly. The kit comes with both grill mesh for the front and a little extra piece. So the front one is actually kind of pressed into a mold, and I just had to trim it very, very minimally to get it to fit into the bracket that he includes. I wanted to kind of bend that bracket a little bit so it followed the curve of the front. However, I almost melted the thing because I used a regular heat gun. In the end, not necessary. It fits in there just fine. I used some double-sided tape to mount it in there. I painted the grill mesh itself a matte black using that XF11. I also did one for the rear, cut out this rear portion here as part of that kind of whole radiator, cooler, oil cooler, whatever it is, setup in back here. I've mentioned it that I had this other XF01X chassis. Again, it started as a Ford Escort. I keep pointing over here. Maybe I should just kind of bring it over a little bit. Yeah, so a kit that's been around for a while. So I had that. Now that is set up in the long version, and as mentioned, I wanted a short version, which is what this is, and the short shaft. I did get that extra short shaft from Rob Mitchell and used it in my other XF01X chassis. And now this is a Team Blue Goop version of the 959 body. The portion of here is slightly thinner than the L&L version, but it's still much more robust than what I've seen the original 959 bodies. You'll also notice that the wheels are much smaller here than Rob Mitchell version, and clearly this fills out these wheel wells a lot better. So I wouldn't mind figuring out the tires that he used and some wheels that'll fit those, because I think it'll look better. And you also notice it's a little bit forward, or the body's a little bit back, I should say. Now, why is this a Repsol one? Obviously there was no 959 Repsol, wouldn't make much sense. It's always just a livery and a color that I loved. So I got the scaled down version of the 959 decal set down to 12 scale. And then I also ordered the Repsol Ford Escort decals that I used for this body that I have for my XV02. There's a video of that. By the way, like and subscribe to my channel, help support us, and please leave a comment below about what you think of the builds, any of them, love it. Anyways, this body's from L&L Models and the wing is as well, but I do love this livery. I had this body back in the day. I believe I ended up putting it on a TA02 that I had, though I know I for sure bought the body separately. So this is the regular 10 scale version of the decal set. And then when you order from MCI, you can opt to have the decals scaled to almost any scale you want. So I had a 12 scale version of it done and got that sent off to me. And because the blue doesn't quite line up, this blue stripe that goes around doesn't line up with the actual body, obviously because it's originally meant for an Escort, I mixed up my own dark blue paint with some paints that I had and did this stripe myself. This is not, the stripe itself is not a decal, nor are these parts right here like it would be on the normal one. So just a fun little side project, but as you can see, it is the shortened chassis. But this will be a runner, so way to kind of get that out. And it's a Lexan rear wing, whereas this is 3D printed plastic. So little bonus content for you. Well, let's go ahead and look at some glamour shots of the 959 here as we talk a little bit about some of the details here. Up front, as I mentioned, we have the kind of faux grille here that is painted the body color. You can see that a lot of the panel lining is really crisp. It stayed in place. It looks really sharp. It really kind of adds a detail to it. The paint I've been fairly happy with, using all of those kind of techniques that I mentioned about, you know, using the Tamiya masking tape, the masking that's provided by Rob Mitchell really creates some nice clean lines for the most part. I, again, can kind of see the slight little mishaps or whatnot. Now, as I mentioned, you can kind of see the light leaks that happen in the back with those red lights. And you can see how the exhausts are done here off of that skid plate. So it's a real nice touch. Those mud flaps just fit under the body just perfectly. And you can see the detail that is included on the drivers. Oh, also was included a very small piece I almost missed, was a little piece of chrome decal to go inside, and again, pre-cut inside those rearview mirrors. So a very nice touch again by Rob on that one. Well, this was a extremely long video. I think when I first started reviewing some of the footage to see what I was going to talk about, I had over 80 clips, and there's probably even almost 100 now that I added some. So I hope this wasn't too verbose. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're one of the 100 people that got this kit, I don't know how many people are building them. I haven't done too much research, but I haven't seen any other builds that were posted on YouTube or anything like that. If you have this kit and you do want to keep it new in box, that's fine, that's your thing. But I would highly recommend opening it up, looking at the packaging, looking at some of the parts that are included. It is such a work of art. It is such a precise piece of engineering to do all of this stuff that it really deserves to be appreciated. I know Rob Mitchell is doing some other parts for the new 956 kit that came out. I didn't grab one of those, but I would say any kind of detail kit that he's putting out for any Tamiya kit would absolutely be worth a purchase. He's not sponsoring me, so that is just my humble opinion. Anyways, that's all I've got for you today. Please remember to like and subscribe. Again, comment below. Love to hear from you. And we'll talk RC again later. Thank you. What do you think?